Today's argument is a Mythic Plus, or rather the news given to us by Blizzard about 11.2's Mythic Plus news. So we have three different things that were given to us from Blizzard. Number one, the alternative to being a Night Elf when it comes to being able to use Shadow Meld in Mythic Plus. Number two, of course, the new dungeon rotation in Mythic Plus, and then number three, the new Leave Buster system, the new penalty for leavers in Mythic Plus. So the one that of course will draw more of a discussion is now the fact that Mythic Plus leavers will be penalized with the new deserter system coming in Season 3. Now, this is something that, if you remember, a few months ago was already initially, we already got an idea of it when we got the news that Blizzard started to ban intentional griefers from Mythic Plus. Now, some players got the wrong idea. They thought that, players leaving after one wipe, you just pull the first room of Cinderbrew, you wipe, the tank leaves, those were the griefers. No, that was the more, the more troll-like players ended up being banned for their behavior in Mythic Plus, and not really players leaving keys even after just like 1 minute in a dungeon. This one, however, for Season 3 will actually be around that kind of early leaving at the first sight of trouble. What was said in the announcement was we will be sharing, of course, more news as we go deeper in the Ghosts of Karesh's PTR cycle, but we are introducing the new deserter system, and that the rough summary is that you will need to put up an abandon vote, essentially, in a dungeon if things aren't going well for you to be leaving. And if the group is agreeing to the disband, then you can leave without any kind of penalty. However, if the vote fails and the group doesn't want to leave, then you leaving the group would tag you basically with a deserter penalty. And then on top of that, it's pointed out that if you are leaving keys too often, so if you're one of the players who does often leave keys after the first wipe, puts up a disband vote, the vote fails, you leave anyways, then you will be marked as someone who leaves often in the group finder. So whenever you try to queue up again, to find the group again in the group finder, other players who might have invited you are going to be able to see you with presumably some icon showing that you have left dungeons early quite often. Now, initially, from this description, it doesn't even sound like there is actually going to be, like in the actual group finder, a debuff, a deserter debuff. The only thing that was pointed out is if you keep leaving often without the group disband vote being successful, the game will basically keep track of you having left the group when the vote failed, and then if you do it enough times, you will start to be tagged as a player who leaves often. But in terms of the immediate result or the immediate punishment, there will be nothing. It will only be, as they mentioned, if you are someone who leaves often, you will get the mark of the leaver whenever you try to sign up for a group in the Looking for Group tool. Now, many players, of course, were excited about this possible way to address some of the issues with players with leaving the Looking for Group tool with this change. However, of course, it's also hard to say how this will affect the community without seeing all of the details in action. As we mentioned, if there is no debuff, if you try to put up a vote, the vote fails and you leave and there is no debuff, and within 1 minute you can join another group, then this has little effect. So it will be about how quickly you will get the warning, how quickly will other players get the warning that you are someone who leaves often. Is it after 5 dungeons you left often, even if the disband vote failed? Is it after 10 dungeons? Is it after 20 dungeons? We don't know yet. Then, of course, there are other players who might still have concerns about the fact that this could still lead to some, malicious players holding a key hostage. We will go from very simply players leaving because you died on the first pool of some dungeon to players simply saying, vote yes on the disband or I troll. Vote yes on the disband or I go AFK. What's the point in keep playing if the guy is just standing still in the entrance of the dungeon until you vote yes to the disband vote? Now this is reminiscent, of course, if you played any MOBAs recently or even in the past few years, whether it was League or Dota or even current team shooter games, there are surrender votes, right? You can set up a surrender vote, you need to win 4-1 for the surrender vote to be successful, and you will also have memories of those games where if your vote keeps failing quite often, especially for example if you join a group with a duo queue like the tank and the healer, and the tank and the healer are together, so they refuse to vote yes on the surrender vote, you're stuck in the dungeon forever until the dungeon is completed. Even if you are 10-15 minutes out of time, those two players who are together and keep refusing to vote yes on the disband vote, then you have to stay in there. Some players raised some options of, for example, similar to those games, having a low priority queue. So basically the scuffed players who have been banned, suspended, or have gotten chat restricted, or who have left games often, are put in the same low prio queue. However, in Mythic Plus you don't have the automatic queue. In Mythic Plus you have to have the leader choose the other 4 members of his group. So this kind of automatic queue system wouldn't work for Mythic Plus in World of Warcraft. Then there might also be some worries about semantics, like for example, if the same guy, our same constant lever guy who joins a group for Mechagon, you get the first mega pool of the entire first room of Mechagon, you wipe, the guy instantly leaves. Do the rest of the players, the rest of the 4 players now who have their key bricked immediately because the guy left, do they still have to vote? Yes, to be able to leave, even if now they are only 4 players? Or can they now also leave after the one guy left? The other one could be disconnects. Would disconnecting still count as leaving? You know, what if players realize, now that leaving immediately on the first wipe doesn't work anymore, because if I keep doing it, I'm gonna get tagged as a player who leaves often, then now the new meta will be I just leave the game, I just Alt F4, I just quit, I disconnect. Technically, I'm still inside of the dungeon. Technically, I still haven't left my group. I'm just out of the game. So would they still count and tag me as a player who left? There is also the fact that we don't really, and it is likely we won't really know what will be the exact threshold for someone being marked a leaver. As we mentioned, if it is 5 times 5 dungeons you left, or if it is 10 dungeons you left, when will the mark of doom come on your character for when you're trying to queue up for a new dungeon and other players will be able to see you are a frequent leaver? As said, it is likely we will never know the exact number because it might lead to some abuse. You know, if Blizzard said, okay, the exact number of dungeons you're allowed to leave before the disband vote is successful is 10. So players will be able to just keep count of how many dungeons they are allowed to leave before reaching that threshold and triggering the mark on their character. And then the last final question mark about this system is another thing that was mentioned by the Blizzard devs in this interview, was the fact that for the moment, at the very least, Blizzard is not going to penalize you on an account level. Does this mean that no penalty on an account level means things like, no, of course, we're not going to suspend your account, or temporarily ban your account, or chat restrict your account? Or does this mean we are not actually going to give you an account-wide penalty? So every single one of your characters will get this mark of the lever whenever you try to join in a looking for group dungeon or even raid. Because if that were the case, of course, a player who is playing his druid keeps leaving on his druid, eventually gets marked in the looking for group tool on his druid for being a frequent leaver, then he can just log on his paladin and keep playing as his paladin without having the mark of the lever, because Blizzard is not penalizing the account but just the single character. And then the last of the questions we still don't know much about is you will go and set up an abandon vote. However, as they mentioned, if the group agrees, you can disband. So does this mean the group has to exactly agree 5-0? So every member of the group needs to be okay with quitting the key, or can you win? Is it just a majority vote, where if 3 players of the group are okay with leaving over 2 who aren't, then you can still leave? Or even 4-1, where only 1 player wants to keep going and the other 4 just want to leave? It is, possible and likely that it will actually have to be a 5-0. Like the entire group is okay with leaving, simply because in this game you have a key holder. So it is much more likely in this kind of game, unlike other style of games like MOBAs, where 1 player will want to keep going regardless, and that is the guy with the key, the guy who actually started the dungeon. So it would be much more likely for him to still vote no on the abandon vote and lock everyone else in the dungeon. That is also something this announcement wasn't quite clear on. So there are still, of course, some questions and possible worries for the abuse or the misuse of this system when it will be implemented. I guess it's still at least something, because this issue of players leaving a bit too often, even when sometimes it's still perfectly doable or possible to finish a key, in a lash of frustration, players just leave immediately. It's a full wipe, even though technically you are only still 1 minute within the timer. Some player just gets triggered and leaves. So starting to, at least try to come up with something to curb that kind of behavior in Mythic Plus would be quite helpful. Hopefully, of course, given that it is being implemented well. So the initial idea, the initial thought for the system is okay. It's necessary because I'm sure everyone here has gone through this 1, 2, 3, maybe even 10, 20, 30 times in this season. Having a key you thought was still timeable, you thought was still fine. Sure, you had an oopsie, someone missed an interrupt, it was a full wipe, but it was still doable, but 1 player got triggered and just left, right? So trying to stop this kind of behavior is good. However, it will be up to how will this system be implemented, the degrees to which this system will be able to be abused by players, whether or not it will create even more toxicity in your group, like players starting to get actively hostile with each other because someone or a couple of players are voting no, so the other 3 start shit-talking the other 2 because they voted no, etc, etc. Maybe, or rather likely, they will keep the votes anonymous, so you won't be able to know and see who is voting yes or no, just like in other games. We will see how this will be fully fleshed out in Season 3. It is good though, it is a nice idea if it will be fully fleshed out. I'm sure Season 3, the last one of this expansion, will be for receiving the feedback, receiving all of the possible QOL adjustments to have it much more polished starting from the next expansion as well. So with some, tepid optimism, we can look at this new introduction of this system coming in Season 3. Hopefully it will get better over time. I'm sure it will create a bunch of memes and weird scenarios as soon as this system is released, but for today, this is what we have in terms of announcements for 11.2 on this Saturday. Some better help for the lever problem in Mythic Plus. So, for today on this Saturday, it is now time to leave each other. We're starting, as usual, the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I guess I will trust the weather report. There is 33 degrees now, and it says in 2 hours it's gonna be raining. Looks weird, but I'll trust.